I'll never forget that day when I asked myself the question, is this it? Is this all there is to strive for in life? That day, I set out on a journey to find more. Now, I am sitting down with the most fulfilled to teach us the tools and tips they use to get there so we can do it faster. Think different, earn different, live fulfilled. This is Contrarian Cashflow. All right. Well, welcome everybody into Contrarian Cashflow. I've got John Casmon here today with me. John, how are you doing?
Hey, I'm great, John. Thank you for having me on the show. I'm really excited to talk to you and your guest or your audience today.
Really appreciate it. Really appreciate it. So, well, for those that don't know John, he's a master marketer, multifamily investor, and of course, above all else, a loving father and husband. So, John, what are you working on right now?
Well, I mean, we have a couple of deals in the pipeline that we're working on. Outside of that, we are always looking to grow our network. I think it's really important to try to reach as many people as you can, educate them about who you are, what you do, how you help people, and grow the business. Like you, I'm a father, as you mentioned, and for us, it's really about trying to create the memories today. Having that time with our loved ones, our kids, my wife. And just appreciating the day. Tomorrow's not promised to any of us, and we got to take advantage of the time we have. So just trying to, be conscious of that with all the decisions that we make, providing us with some flexibility and creating a lifestyle that we want.
Yeah, man. No, absolutely. Nothing more important than your time, right? Or valuable. So, so what are you doing to stay sane during COVID right now? I mean, it's a tough time for everybody. What are you doing with the family or whatever to stay a little bit normal?
Well, a couple things. One of the things for us is, I have two little boys, so I have a 6 and a 4-year-old. So for them, they need routine. They need some balance and some structure in their life. So we kind of have ways to make some days more interesting and look forward to the next day. So we have a couple of days of the week we do something a little fun. So in this household, Taco Tuesday is honored and has been honored for at least a year straight. So
That's
every
awesome.
Tuesday night we do Taco Tuesdays, and usually my sister-in-law will come over and we'll all get together and do tacos. So it's a fun thing. I ask the kids, what's today, and they yell out Taco Tuesday. So that's always fun. And then we do donuts with dad on Friday. So Friday morning before school, I will get them out. I'll take them to a local donut place. We'll grab some donuts, we'll eat, and then I'll drop them off to school. So try to have a couple of things that they can look forward to each week and keep things going. And outside of that, for me, it's really about, trying to keep my own routines together. So I have a routine where I try to do my affirmations in the morning, get in a workout, and make sure I go through my daily goals, the things I want to accomplish for the week. And, at the end of every night, try to review those goals, as well as at the end of each week, reflect back on what we did, any areas that we weren't able to achieve, and then plan the next week coming up. So that kind of helps me stay focused and being conscious of that too, man. I think the problem most people are having with COVID is you feel limited and restrained. And for me, it's like the friends and family and the networking I've put on hold for the most part. Haven't seen a lot of our friends and family for those reasons. So just trying to find ways to take that personal time, be conscious of it. Maybe having a Zoom or a FaceTime chat with a loved one, and getting out of the house where we can. If we go hit some golf balls or something else where you can distance a little bit and try to keep everybody safe, which I'll do that too.
Man, some parenting and self-development nuggets right at the beginning here. So no, love that. Those are some great strategies. So, well, I just love your story. That's one of the main reasons I wanted to bring you on. Like I said, you've got a multitude of different skill sets and wear a bunch of different hats. So how did you get to where you are today from, being this corporate outstanding marketer to now you've got your own business, you're doing multifamily investing. So what was that journey like?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like a lot of your listeners, when I was starting out, I was told, the path to success was to get a good job. First of all, go to college, graduate, get a good job, work that job until you retire, and then you can go off and live a wild adventure, right? And for me, I'm the first one in my family to go to college and graduate from college. So I spent a lot of my formative years trying to figure out what success actually looked like in my head, right? Because I didn't have someone breathing down my neck telling me you have to do it this way. There were a lot of options for me, but I saw that as the path that I was supposed to take. I read Rich Dad Poor Dad like a lot of people, and that really opened up my eyes to the way money actually works, the way business income is and investment income and things like that. So fast forward, I loved marketing. One of the things in that book that stood out, everyone always talks about the money aspect, but one of the things that really jumped out to me in the book was you should work a job to develop a skill. And once you've developed that skill, you should move on. And that probably, I mean, even more than the money stuff, that probably stuck with me more than anything else. And he talked about, I think there was a zipper company or something like that he worked for. And, he did sales and marketing there and he developed that skills and then he moved on to something else. Well, I knew I wanted to get into marketing because I felt that if you could attract clients and attract business, then you could do anything. If you could learn how to communicate a product or a service, then you can create any business. So I was also really intrigued by communications. I took a class in high school, and it was so basic but so mind blowing. And I'll give you one. If you're around my age, so I'll ask you this. Back in the day, before cable really jumped onto the screen, you had a handful of media outlets, right? You had ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox, PBS, right? And my teacher said, "Why do you think you get these channels? And why do you think you're able to watch these shows for free?" And I'm like, so they could, they can talk to us and share us information if they need to. Who is they? And I was like, the government? And he's like, try advertisers. And I was like, what? And he broke it down about how it works and who actually pays for it. And that helped me just really understand the ecosystem of, you have these free platforms, but an advertiser is paying for it so they can get in front of an audience so they can sell a product. And I was just intrigued. I wanted to learn more. I wanted to understand it. So that led me down the pathway of advertising and marketing. So
That's one thing
fast
that I
forward.
struggle with too, is just around the
Yeah.
marketing aspect, is especially from a personal branding. And again, one of the reasons I was excited to get you on is I'm a sales guy through to see what happens. And that's one of the things I'm getting more and more used to, is around the marketing aspect and just the personal branding and things of that sort. And so to your point, the fact that you were able to have a scenario that resonated with you at such a young age, and like you said, with marketing, you're attracting people to you and the likes that you want. Whereas at sales, for the most part, I'm always out there hunting, so as soon as I get a scenario, a customer or a deal, I have to move on to the next one because that one's done. And so now I'm personally on a journey around marketing and getting better at that. Hey, how do I work smarter, not harder, around getting passive and incoming leads versus everything being outbound? I think that's tremendous.
Yeah. And they work hand in hand together, right? So, I mean, you have to take advantage of the leads that you're giving. If you don't take advantage of the leads, reach out to them, talk to them, and engage with them, then all the marketing in the world's not going to result in a sell if you're not ready to close that lead. I mean, you have a great TV spot, someone walks into the store to buy your product, and you don't have it on the shelf, or the salesman can't get the consumer what they're looking for. It really won't matter, right? So you still have to have all those components together. Marketing is really the lead generation piece, though. What it does is it sparks interest, it conveys the product or service benefits, it gets someone interested. The sales is really there to take over. And the big difference, like you said, is there's inbound marketing and there's outbound marketing. Outbound is you picking up the phone, you call in every person who owns a property on your list. It's all of those different things. Inbound marketing is when you have the ability to have your phone ring with people who are interested in your product or service. So if you can focus on inbound marketing, you're going to be more effective. You're going to save more time. You are dealing with people who have raised their hands saying, yes, I'm interested. Please help me, teach me how your product can help. Versus outbound marketing, you may get the phone, you might get a couple clicks, you might get people telling you to stop bugging them and all those different things. So just a little bit of a different approach. But if you want to create something that's sustainable and efficient, you really need to focus on your inbound marketing tactics.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. So obviously, okay, so this is how you got into the realm of marketing and how it's important to you. And so you got out of college. What was that progression like? What got you into the corporate world and down that path?
Yeah. So, I mean, I really thought it was, again, I probably should have done a better job of getting mentors as a young person, but I had a lot of will. So I had a strong willpower to just figure stuff out. So at that time, I realized kind of late that I really needed to get an internship. And I tried to call companies to get hired when I was getting ready to graduate. And they're like, well, do you have any experience? I'm like, no. How do you get experience? They're like, well, you need to get an internship. I'm like, oh, crap. So I literally went to the library. I spent 10 hours in the library. I had a really nice librarian who helped me. And I told her I needed to find an internship, a marketing internship. So I sat down. She logged me into the system. We looked at every marketing internship in the United States. I went through about I think there were like 94 internships, and there was one that kept popping up. So that one, I focused my efforts saying, I'm going to apply all my energy to this one first. And if that doesn't go through, I'll move to the next ones. I ended up getting that internship. It was for a job out in Detroit, working for a marketing agency. So I got that. That basically was the last time I interviewed for a job.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
I
Well,
kid you
that's
not.
grinding though. I mean, to sit down, I mean, to put that effort forth, I mean, that's awesome. I think that's something sometimes people look past is what actually leads to success, right? So, I mean, if you didn't actually take the time and sit down and put in the effort to get that internship, right? I mean, that's tremendous. So that's the stuff that I really want to encompass.
So for those of you who can watch this or see this, I'm holding up a book right now. It's How to Sell Yourself by Jill Gerard. And I read this book my senior year in college. And this book is from the world's greatest salesman. That's what he says in quotes. And this book really helped me from a mindset standpoint to what you're saying. And in short, there's a story in the book where he talks about a guy who was trying to get a job, and I think he was like working on a deck or something like that, or a dock. And the short story is the guy showed up every week. They told him there were no jobs. Every week he show up, there are no jobs. After about 9 weeks, and a lot of people would show up, but they tell him, hey, they got no jobs. And he said, you come here. And they said, you've been here every week. I keep telling you there's no jobs, and you keep showing up. And he's like, I'm going to keep showing up until you tell me there is a job. And he hired him on the spot, right? And it's that kind of thing. So for me as a young person, I always had that initiative because I always felt too like I couldn't fail. Not
Yeah.
because I was, insulated from failure, but just I was going to work too hard. I was not going to let failure happen. I was either going to learn or I was going to develop. So the first like real time I had to go out and really compete, I was willing to put in that kind of work. When I did my first job out of college, I created even my thank you card, man. I created a character for my thank you card, and I put the card in this pot holder. I don't know if you remember the Arby's campaign. They used to have a little oven mitt that was running around. Well,
Yeah.
I couldn't find enough oven mitt, so I found a red pot holder. I colored a face on it, looked just like the oven mitt. I gave him a backstory, and I put the card in the oven mitt, and I mailed it to the woman who interviewed me. And they were going to hire me anyway, but she got that and was like, this dude clearly is above and beyond the competition, right? But it's just, how do
That
you
just seems like
stand
that's a
out?
long time ago though, too. I mean, that's like, I feel like a lot of people are trying to differentiate themselves today with strategies like that. So, I mean, the fact that you were doing that, years ago, right out of college, I mean, that's tremendous. I mean, your mind, obviously, like you said, you were working on your mindset. So obviously your mind just kind of was to the point where to the book you were just recommending, selling yourself constantly. How do I present myself so that they say we have no choice but to hire John because he's the best, not only he's the best candidate, but he's also giving us the most as far as ancillary benefits of his creativity. So that's awesome, man. That's a great story.
Yeah, man. I mean, listen, I was extremely hungry, as you can tell from the stories, and I wanted to make sure that hunger came through. And at a minimum, if you hired me as like, well, the kid was hungry, right? Like, there's a 50-50 shot he's actually smarter, can do it, but that hunger you can't teach. You can
Right.
teach someone how to do different things. You can't teach them passion. You can't teach them hunger. You can't teach them dedication. So if I can show up to the table with those skills, then they can mold me into their way of doing business. So I mean, I felt like that gave me a chance to stand out. And in all truthfulness, that literally was the last time I ever interviewed. Every job I've had since then was essentially a job that was handed to me based on a previous relationship there. So I went from there. I actually went home to focus on the family business I was doing. The place I interned at, they called me every month. They called me every month for a year. And then finally, after the 13th time they called me, I said, you know what? I am interested. It's about time now to do something else. They flew me out. I had an interview, I mean, listen, I interviewed formally, but I
Of
never
course.
applied is what I should say. I interviewed.
Yeah.
I never applied for a job.
Yeah.
So they flew me out. I interviewed with a handful of folks. I got this other job that was a fellowship program. General Motors was one of my clients through that fellowship program. In that program, I went to Chicago. While I was in Chicago, the program was wrapping up. I got a call from one of my friends who was working with General Motors. They said, "Hey, your old client got promoted, and they're looking for a backfill. Your name came up. They would love to interview you for the job." And they flew me out to Detroit, interview for the job, got the job. And again, it always happened like that as far as the career stuff. It's
That's
just
awesome.
you make an impression on people. If and when there's an opportunity, people wanted to bring me along because they knew I could add value to them and their team.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, so you're Midwest through and through. So you're Chicago, Cincinnati, Detroit. I mean, so you got the whole Midwest swing going on.
That's right.
So
But Cleveland is home. Make sure it's clear. I'm born and raised in Cleveland. I live in Cincinnati, but Cleveland is where my heart is.
nice, nice. Cleveland rocks. Yeah, we know that. So okay. So you've got this job at GM. So now you're obviously out of that realm. So what spawned kind of the transition from working for such a large, global employer to kind of taking a step back and looking to do something different?
Yeah, so I mean, I wanted to share the earlier story because I wanted you to understand the passion and the focus and energy that I had as a recent college grad trying to break into corporate America, the success. I mean, at General Motors, I was doing stuff working with the Pontiac brand. We're working with, musicians, 50 Cent, Pussycat Dolls. We were doing stuff with Maxim. We're doing stuff with NCAA video games. I was working with, Kirk Herbstreit and Chris Fowler and all these guys,
That's
right? So we're
awesome.
doing super cool stuff for a 25, 26-year-old marketing executive, right? So I'm on top of the world in a lot of regards from a corporate standpoint, right? I'm doing really well. I see my path to success, and bankruptcy starts to come around, right? So this is GM. This is 2007, 2008, 2009. So we start, falling off from a financial standpoint. We run into some financial issues, and what it forced me to do was to really reflect on the goals that I had set for myself, the path that I was on, and where my next step was. Like anybody in this time, if you are on, working your job, you're young in your career, and you're watching your company get dragged through the mud from a media standpoint, you are watching all the hard work that you've put into your career essentially start to get slandered, right? I mean, this is at the time where I felt like that blue bug, the GM name, was going to be a hindrance on my resume because no one wanted to hire a guy who was the marketing person there. So as I looked to start applying for the jobs just to make sure I had some options, guess what? I wasn't getting callbacks.
Yeah.
And I could only liken this to if you were a financial executive and you worked at Enron, and I'm being a bit over the top dramatic, but picture that. Picture you were a great financial, accountant or whatever. You work for Enron and you're going to try to go apply. I mean, that's what I felt like. And it wasn't that bad, but I'm like, I have to get off this sinking ship.
Yep.
And as I looked around to my bosses, my colleagues, there was a fear that was abundant. You could cut the room with. It was just tension. And every day you walked into that environment and it was draining. And again, as a younger professional, I felt like, well, I've only dedicated 18 months to this. Like I can go and pivot and do something else. There are people who have been here for 20 years. This is who they are. Like they don't really have as many options. And I distinctly remember, you know, when it was formalized that we were going into bankruptcy, that actually removed a lot of tension because we at least now had a plan. We had some clarity. I didn't have to keep watching the news to figure out what in the heck was going on. But we also had to go through another round of layoffs. And I was told that I was safe, not to worry about it. But I remember going into work that day a little bit late because I didn't want to see it or,
Yep.
be a part of it. Um, and I got into the office. It was very quiet, eerily quiet that morning because everybody else apparently came in late too. And I came in like kind of late. They came in super late. So I get to my desk. No one's in my aisle. And there's a red light blinking on my phone. And there's a voice message. And no one leaves voicemails, right? So my heart starts pounding. I'm like, man, they're going to fire me. They didn't have the guts to tell me and truthfully say it yesterday. He told me not to worry about it. He could have just gave me some corporate BS line. He told me not to worry about it. So my heart starts pounding. I look at the red light for like 20 seconds. Finally, I pick it up. I'm like, look, if it is what it is, nothing I can do about it. You know, I know I
Yep.
bust my tail here, whatever. I listened to the voicemail. It's one of my colleagues, and he's been with the company 24 years. He is diabetic. He has no idea he's going to pay for his medicine that he needs. And he is heartbroken and he feels betrayed by the company that they are letting him go. And I had empathy for him because I can only imagine what that must be like for you to dedicate yourself. And I looked to my own father, who had worked two companies in his entire life. And that was not by his choice. He would have stayed at the one company for his entire career if he could have. And I can imagine that mindset and the kind of folks who are looking for that stability. And that's why you go for a big company, right? And so I understood that. But the other piece that came over me was uh, a sense of empowerment, that I never wanted to be in that position where, you know, I had no idea how I was going to take care of my medicine or, you know, my basic survival skills. And, you know, I didn't want my family to be in that situation. Even though I wasn't married at the time, I did not want to be in that situation. So that was the last moment where I reverted back to Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I remembered the principles that he talks about in that book. And I made it a priority to take the income I was making from my day job, put it into investments that could pay me, and then start to really build really a diversified portfolio, an income producing portfolio, not just retirement savings, but a portfolio of income that's coming in from different angles. So if at any point I wanted to quit or leave my job or I got fired, I wasn't sitting there worried about how I was going to pay my bills. So that was really critical for me. And that ultimately spawned me into real estate investing and building my own personal portfolio before transitioning into apartment syndication, working with other investors.
That's that's so important. And I think for me, a big part of that is, I mean, this is during, the Great Recession, right? I mean, that's one of the greatest financial crises since the Great Depression. And so, if that were not to happen, if that mindset shift may not have occurred, right? So it's, we look at these scenarios and especially equating it to modern day with COVID going on right now, what are these positives we can take from this circumstance that we can use to move us forward? And I think that's one of the things I'm seeing from friends and family that I know that have jobs that you never thought would be a challenge, right? A doctor. I mean, I have a friend that his wife's a physician, and she is getting furloughed and she's a general practitioner, and she's getting furloughed because they don't want so many patients coming in, right? And like dentists. I mean, so people that have these top-notch jobs are struggling with the same, kind of challenges that you're talking about there from the great financial crisis from before. And so I think for me, that's just such an important part of it, to say, you've got to insulate yourself. You've got to build this overarching ability to create income outside of just one stream, regardless if it's a W-2 job, if it's a business that you own, or if it's investments. If you're relying solely on any of those, that's just a single point failure. There's going to be a day and time that comes that, that there's going to be a reckoning, and that's going to stop or subside to a degree. So, well, let's dig in on
And John, just if I
yeah.
can real quick, I think to that point, especially for those people who worked so hard, if you've worked really hard to get to where you're at today, you then have to go into defense mode. How can I lose this? What would happen? What would it take for me to lose what I've earned? And that's what started to go through my head. Even though I hadn't accumulated a huge amount of wealth at that point, all of those hours and through college and sacrificing and the internships and building this marketing career and going the extra mile was running through my head. Is like, man, at any moment this can be wiped out. And I saw it not so much in me because I was a junior executive, but I looked at my bosses, and one of them got shipped to Shanghai. She
Wow.
had teenage kids. She came from California. They moved her to Shanghai. The other one got forced into early retirement. Another one got demoted. And I just started to look like, man, these people don't have power over their own careers, where they live, some of the basic things that we want to control, your income, how much you make. And it's like, dude, you work so hard for this, and for someone else to be able to take that away, that's where it clicked. And I would say, just, I think for anything with COVID, it should show us that there is no such thing as recession proof, right? There's recession resistant. But sometimes it's politics. Sometimes it's something else. You just get pushed out. You're not someone's guy. If you work in corporate America, if you're not someone's guy or girl, they just don't like you, or you're too close to someone else, that could be a wrap for you. And it's just, so you got to just keep these things in mind. Sometimes it's not really about how good you are, how hard you work. It's just the circumstances of things. You just don't want to be the person, stuck holding the bag when the music stops playing. Figure out, how do you create some other streams of income so you can continue to take care of your family and make the decisions that are best for you and yours.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Those are tremendous points. So what started you down the path of real estate? Obviously, there's a multitude of different investment vehicles you could have chosen. So why real estate? You mentioned Rich Dad Poor Dad, so I'm sure that had a little bit of an influence on it. But why real estate?
It had a lot. So, I mean, for me, I didn't know a lot of people who invested, honestly. I mean, certainly people who had stocks and maybe, 401ks and things like that, but I did not grow up around investors. So for me, when I went to think about how to start investing, real estate was one thing that was at least somewhat familiar, in the sense that I remember being a renter as a kid, my mom paying rent and watching her bust her tail to come up with the rent money to get to some guy. So I recall that, and I said, man, I'd love to be on the other side of this equation. I also started to pay attention to what I was paying in rent, and I'm like, all right, like I lived at this complex and I think my rent was like $800. And I just started calculating. I'm like, there are 152 units here in this complex, $800 a month. And I was like, damn, they're making pretty good money here. And I said, it would be really nice to be on the other side of this equation, right? Rich Dad Poor Dad opened up my eyes. It wasn't that book as much as it was the ABCs of Real Estate, which I read shortly thereafter by Ken McElroy. And Ken talks about, your first deal could be 100 unit, which at the time I was like, dude, you are smoking crack, because ain't nobody gonna go out there and buy 100 units as their first deal, right?
Yep.
And he doesn't talk about syndication and things like that in the book, but he just throws it out there. And I'm like, this dude's crazy. But let's go get this. Let's go get this 2 unit. I think I could do a 2 unit for my first.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely.
So for me, it made sense. I started to go to real estate investor association groups, started to read more. And as I started to get more and more comfortable, that just made sense. Stocks, I didn't get. I tried to learn about stocks. I tried to read, Peter Lynch's books and things like that. It was just too complex for me. Real estate was fairly straightforward. I thought the stock game, shorts, I was just confused. It was too much for me. So with real estate, I knew people needed a place to live. I felt like with my market research, I would have a good ability to at least identify places where people wanted to go. And at a minimum, I needed a place to live. So if I bought where I wanted to live, I could probably attract similar like-minded individuals. So I moved from Detroit to Chicago. And went to the agency side of things, working on other clients. And at that time, I bought a 2-unit building with my wife, and we lived in 1 unit. We rented out the other unit. That went extremely well for us, and so well, in fact, that we decided to do it again. We bought a 3-unit. This time, we just bought it straight out and rented it, and that went well. We refinanced the first property. We were able to pull out 6 figures in a line of credit equity, and that went from, okay, this is a good way to invest, to, oh, this works. Like,
That's some
this is a
stacks. Yeah,
great
that's some
way
money right
to
there.
this is a great way to build real wealth, right? This is how you actually change the trajectory of your income and elevate your finances. So when we did that, I bought an 8-unit building, and I bought that 8-unit building for 2 reasons. One, it was a good deal, but I really bought it because I wanted experience in commercial. I wanted to get up to 5+ units to have experience in commercial. And then 2, I wanted to manage a property management company or a property manager, because I wanted to build that experience. At that point, I had made a conscious decision to say, I'm going to start working up to buying larger apartments. And I want to build a strong foundation to at least learn some of the stuff I may not know, since I've been self-managing up to this point. I wanted to have that experience, so I felt more comfortable, confident, and competent going out there trying to acquire these larger properties.
So that, I think that's a question that I have, and I think a lot of people run into is, so you talk about Ken McElroy, or you talk about, some of these folks saying, hey, 100 units, 150, 200 units is their first deal. Or like you talked about, you bought a duplex, you bought a triplex, and then you moved your way up to an 8-unit. So what was your experience, and would you change anything from kind of going through the progression that you did versus just jumping off the deep end and going into that 100-unit deal?
Yeah, absolutely. So first and foremost, I think for me, I wouldn't change too much of what I've done, knowing what I knew at the time. Okay. And for me, it was practical. I needed to learn it, believe in it, have confidence in it for me to move forward. again, I didn't know people who invested in real estate. So for me, anytime I physically met a real estate investor, it was like Christmas. I wanted to learn everything about them, know what they did. And I don't care if it was just a house. If I met you and you actually owned a piece of property that you rented out, I was like, you got to tell me more. How did you do it? What'd you do? And that's how I was. I was like a little kid who was just discovering something for the first time. So starting out, I just had kind of this insatiable interest in investing. And I don't think I would have been able to just, invest passively or whatever at that time. So my path in doing those first couple of deals, it was really solidifying that this was real. I didn't know. And I was, I guess, a little scared and concerned that, hey, maybe there's something that people are missing out. Maybe there's something that, I'm just missing. I read a ton of books. I got a bookshelf full of, real estate investing books. I've been at a ton of meetings. I've listened to so many podcasts, all of that stuff, right? I educated myself as much as I could, but you got to get to a point where you got to pull a trigger, and I would say get about 85% there on the confidence with your education. Then you got to pull the trigger. The last 15 to 20%, you have to learn yourself from reality, not from a book. So get yourself there and go. What I'll say about, Ken's statement about, getting to 100 units in today's world, if I were starting today, I actually would go that route. And I would even say in the last 3 to 5 years, I would go that route. And the reason is this: no one's talking about apartment syndication pre 2012. Okay. I didn't know about it. I never heard the term. I didn't hear the term for the first time until 2016.
Yep.
So I didn't know it was an option. You know what I mean? Did not know it existed, did not know it was an option. I just assumed that these were very wealthy people who were buying these apartments. And that's just what it was. And I didn't know that everyday people can get together, pool their resources together, and go out and acquire these assets. Just had no idea that this was happening, that this was a thing. So in today's world, that's a great way to get into it because you don't have the burden of being the operator, the asset manager, the property manager. You don't have the burden of executing. You can partner and align with a group that will take on those things. You can learn, you can continue to educate yourself, but you're getting paid to learn. You're earning while you're learning. And if you can do that, now you've put yourself in a position where you're going to be very engaged because your money's on the line. So you're going to ask all the questions you want to ask, right?
Yep.
You're going to analyze these deals with a bit more scrutiny than if I just asked you, kind of passingly if you were interested. Yeah, that's cool. But if I'm telling you put up $100,000, you're like, wait a minute. So what's the occupancy rate on this property again? Your questions get way more intelligent at that
Gets
point.
real.
Right? Yeah. So, I think that's the best way to get into it. And you also minimize your risk, right? You minimize your downside by getting into a deal like this because as the name implies, you are a limited partner. So you only have so much capital risk. And most of the time you're buying a deal that is cash flowing day one anyway. And you have the ability to, not only get those cash flows, but also boost the return. So now it's just a matter of understanding the business plan and identifying where the risk is and making sure that this is, appropriately adjusted for risk with the investment. So if you can do that, I think that's a great way to get started. And if you also want to build a small portfolio or something like that, great. It also comes down to your time commitment though. If you have the time, if you have, nothing but free time, by all means, build your own portfolio. If that's what your passion is, if that's what you really want to do. But if you are a busy professional, you've got a demanding job, you have a family, you've got kids, especially young kids, you have other passions, you love playing golf, you love hanging out with your friends, hiking, camping, whatever. Why would you sacrifice the things that we love to do to go work a second job? That's essentially what you're doing. You're signing up
Yep.
for a second job. We can call it an investment. We can call it whatever makes you feel good, but it's a second job. You just have equity at the second job.
Yep.
Now, why would you sacrifice the time that you have today for a second job? And I'll tell you where this became clear to me. It was I had my oldest son was like 2 at the time, so we had just him. It's a Saturday. I had a unit turn in my 3-unit building. And I went El Cheapo and said, "Oh man, I got a quote to paint. It was like $1,000." I'm like, I ain't paying you $1,000 to paint this property, this unit. I'll paint it myself. So I bought the paintbrush, all that stuff. My materials was like, $100. I spent 7 hours at that unit between prepping the walls, sanding the walls, washing walls, lining them up for the trim, painting the walls, painting the trim. 7 hours total. My wife took my son to the park. They did lunch together. They did dinner together. I missed this moment with my son. The reason I work, by the way, right? The reason this is my why. I do all this for
Yep.
my family, so I say. Yet I'm here busting my ass painting walls while my family is figuring out why daddy is, not here, right? And
Absolutely.
you have to reconcile that, man. Your priorities have to match up with your actions. If you work 80 hours a week and you say you're doing it for your family, are you? Because I'm sure they'd rather have you. I'm sure they'd rather have time with you. And I'm not saying one is right or wrong. I'm not judging. I'm that guy too, right? So all I'm saying is you have to be honest with yourself about how you want to spend your time. And if your goal is, hey, I want to stack as much money as I can to prepare my family for the future, that's completely fine. If it's, hey, I want to spend as much quality time with my family today because I don't know what we're going to have in the future, but I also want to put my money to work so that we're continuing to invest in that and have a long-term vision as well, that's great too. All I'm saying is think about how you're actually spending your time, how you're actually spending your money, and do your actions match up with what you say are your real priorities?
That's such an important point. And I think for me, I've gotten stuck on that myself. And I think a lot of people have a challenge with defining what they think is important to them and then actually following through with the actions. So, I mean, I think your analogy right there of when you were, doing that work, I think we've all been there. Anyone that's done a project, I've definitely had plenty of Saturdays that I've been out on project sites doing stuff that, could have been handled by somebody else. But, I'm like, this is what I want to do, or this is kind of my, this is my penance for learning and trying to get into the game, what have you. But to your point, I think it's just so important to make sure that the actions you're taking are aligning with your why and what you're doing this for. So, well, and I'm jealous. Like the house hack, I don't know why that never was something when I just never knew anything about that. So that's one thing that I regret that I never did. And now with the family and everything, it just doesn't make as much sense in our circumstances to do that. But the house hack is definitely something I'm jealous of, that I wish we kind of got involved in that in the first place. Cause I still think that's the best investment ever, is if you can swing it, buying a smaller place, renting out the other side, and pretty much living for free. So I think that's great. So you talked about, you bought it with your wife. And so how did she get involved? How was she responding? How did your family reacting to, hey, you've got this great job at GM. You're working for these agencies in Chicago, supporting some of these global brands. Oh, well, I'm going to go off and do real estate. So what's their reaction? Are they thinking you're crazy, or what are they saying to you?
You know, the beauty of being the first person to go to college and graduate is people tend not to question the stuff you do as much. You're already kind of a black sheep, not in a bad way, but just like you're already kind of different from what everyone else is doing. So no one really ever questioned my decisions. I will tell you this: when I decided to leave GM, my dad absolutely questioned it, and he thought I was crazy. And I mean, he came up to see me like that kind of crazy. He came up to Detroit and was like, we need to sit down and talk. And I was like, what? But he didn't see the vision. He didn't get it, and it's fine. What I'll say is this, my wife, and I think this is really important, you have to have alignment on your goals. And even when we were dating, we did a really good job of laying out the kind of future we wanted to create. We would sit down, we would budget together. We'd put down like, all right, what's your salary? What's my salary? How much can we save? How much can we afford to pay in rent? If we want to sock away 50% of that, what do we need to do? How much does that leave us to live off of? I was clipping coupons. Like it was that kind of stuff. I got excited to clip coupons and save 50 cents. It was crazy.
That's awesome.
My car's paid off, just all of that kind of stuff. So she always knew about real estate, and I got her, I think I got her interested in real estate, but she honestly was very interested herself. She's my wife comes from a pretty thrifty, resourceful family where, they are pretty conservative with the way they look at money as well. So for us, it was always about how do we make our income last as long as we can? How do we invest? And we would share articles with each other and all that kind of stuff. She was always right there with me, whether it be reading a book or attending an event. We would always go to these things together. So for us, buying that first duplex, that was a joint decision. That was an easy thing. We were completely in lockstep. That 3 unit, it was the same thing. The only pushback she had was, hey, we need to find something that does not need a lot of work because, I'm pregnant, and the last thing I need is, you running over there trying to do this work on this property while I'm sitting here by myself with this newborn baby. So we bought something that was pretty much turnkey and ready to go. But we've always been locked up. And I would say, as it went from us building our own personal portfolio to me kind of transitioning full time as an apartment investor and apartment syndicator, that's where we had to kind of reset what this looks like. What does that mean? Because keep in mind, I'm walking away from a 6-figure salary
Yep.
to go full time and do this. And we had to have a conversation about what that looks like and, what it means to the family and how do we ensure that this is going to be successful over the long haul. And, we had tough conversations, but I would say that she's been beyond supportive. I mean, she's been right there and lockstep, and she's actually want to push me to say, I think you need to be full time doing this. And when she said that, I'm like, all right, now that I have not just her blessing, but like now that she's saying this is what I should do, this is what I should do. Because I was, crushed. I was staying up late till 2 a.m. most nights, knocking on my day job stuff and trying to analyze deals, putting in offers. And I used to set up my emails so I can write emails at 1 o'clock in the morning, but they wouldn't send until regular hours because I didn't want to be like the weirdo sending emails at 2 a.m.
Yep.
So I would do like Boomerang is an app that Google has where you can set the time where you want your emails to go out. Because, you don't want to send brokers emails at 2 o'clock in the morning. Just
Yeah, what's this guy doing awake? What's he got going on?
Well, that, and it's like, clearly you can't do this during normal business hours. So I'm like, all right. So I'm like, hey, I'll set up all of these emails to go during business hours. But I couldn't analyze deals, during the day. So I had to always analyze it in the evening after my kids went to sleep. So I basically would work from, 8:30 to 5:30, get on the train, come home, get my dad time in, and then 9 o'clock to like 2 a.m. and then wake up and do it all again the next day. So, I mean, it got to the point where it was pretty draining.
Yep.
And, we just put a plan in place to say, all right, you need to go full time. So let's figure out what that means and how quickly we can make that happen.
That's awesome. And I think that's a conversation everybody needs to have, at least in, if they're in the circumstances that we are with the spouse and children and family. And I think that's something sometimes people gloss over a little bit in regards to what's the impact on everybody. It's great to chase your dream and to chase things, your aspirations, but if it's at the downfall of another aspect of your life, again, kind of back to that whole, what's important to you? It's great to chase that dream, but if you're never seeing your kids, you're traveling all the time, if you're not around to actually live and invest in those relationships, then, is it really worth it? And again, every individual has to make that decision on their own. I just think that, before you jump into these, and to have such a support system as your wife is tremendous. I mean, I'm so fortunate. The same thing. My wife pushes me constantly and kind of challenges me. We're in the same field, overall in regards to sales and commission-based and things like that. And so, we have a little bit of fun, and she's one of the most competitive people that I know. And I think that's helped me become even stronger and better because I know that she won't, she'll give me a hard time if I'm not putting forth my best effort, if I'm not pushing myself to the best that I can be. So I just think that support system is so important. So from leaving to now where you're at, I'm always curious, do you feel more fulfilled? Are you happier? Is the transition what you expected it to be? What's that process been like? And how do you feel now versus before where you felt, maybe you didn't have as much control of your destiny?
Yeah, that's a great question, and there are a lot of components to it. And the short answer is yes, I do. I'm very happy. I am fulfilled. I enjoy what I'm doing. I would say that the biggest thing for me, and I think this is industry specific, but I don't have the anxiety I used to have. I used to, in the marketing world, especially when I was working for a smaller agency, like we didn't have huge budgets. So, and we were a smaller shop. We were great, but we were a smaller shop. And I felt like if I messed up a meeting, we could lose the business and people would lose their jobs. And it was a real fear in a way because, we might have a retainer that's only $1 million, but that $1 million retainer might have employed 5 people, might literally have covered their salary, overhead, or whatever for 5 people. So if that account went away, those 5 people are losing their jobs,
Yep.
And I felt as the lead business person, it was my job to understand the business challenge, to help make sure our creative solutions solve those business challenges, and to build the kind of rapport and relationship with the client where even if we were off, they trusted us and empowered us to come back to the table. We didn't get the cracks that other agencies would get. I worked for an agency that was more focused on multicultural marketing and more targeted campaigns, more culture driven campaigns. So we didn't have the general market budgets. We didn't have that kind of leniency. It's like, oh, if you didn't perform, it's like, oh, we just won't do it. We'll just
Yep.
give the money to this guy. So I did feel like every day we had to perform. Every day I had to be on. And my boss, the CEO, he also made sure I felt that pressure because he had that pressure as well. So I think just being in an environment where you don't have someone breathing on your neck like that, and great, and we have a great relationship, but I think just from that standpoint, to just focus and put your own pressure on. I love pressure. I've always been good under pressure, but it's just there's real pressure, real anxiety, and then there's like kind of false anxiety that's there, and it's like you get to the point like this doesn't really matter. Like I don't care that this font color was wrong.
Right.
Why am I
Right.
stressing at 2 a.m. because this person used the wrong color orange? It's like when you factor that in, it's like, what is wrong with my life that I'm sitting over here mad over a damn font color? And so that anxiety being gone, great. The other thing that's great is the ability to control my schedule. My son gets off the bus at 4 o'clock. My work day ends at 4 o'clock. So he gets off the bus. My calendar is blocked. You cannot schedule a meeting for me after 4 o'clock. I'm done. So I spend that time. I talked about, how I do my days with them. So that's something that we like to do. On the flip side, what I will say is it becomes a bit more lonely though. I don't have the office. I don't have the colleagues that I could just talk to. There's no hanging out the water cooler. There's no big office to go hang out. So as an entrepreneur, that's the one downside, is that you are more insulated in what you do. You certainly I talk to people all the time. I'm talking to you, talk to investors, talk to brokers. So I have a lot of conversations, but it's not the same kind of environment where you have kind of your work friends. So I don't really have that. So that's the one thing I would say. And then obviously the income is more ebb and flow. We have months where we crush it. We have huge flows of income, and we have some months where it's minimal, right? So that's the other thing, going from kind of a consistent, paycheck to, the entrepreneur wave of sales is
Yep.
the other thing that's pretty different.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Those are great points. So, well, I'm just going to wrap up here with the Contrarian three pack. So, I know you said you're more of a real estate guy, but if you had to look at your portfolio or investments you've ever made, what's the most contrarian investment you'd say you've ever made?
Whew, man. I don't know, man. All of mine have been in real estate. So I will
Someone could
say,
argue that's contrarian. Yeah, I mean, depending on who
okay,
you're talking to, but okay.
okay,
So you
okay,
did the
we'll
house
take
hack.
that.
You did the house hack. I'll give you the house hack, right? That's
Yeah.
not common. Most people are buying a rental as their first real estate investment. So I'll give you the
You know
house
what?
hack.
I'll give you one more. So we did, I invested in a company that was a women's clothing business, and in Detroit, in a high end neighborhood in Detroit, but I did it in 2008. And selling women's jeans for $300 in Detroit in 2008 ended up not being the best timing. So
All right. Well, hey, that's a great one. I'll take that. I'll take that. So, okay. Well, obviously the timing wasn't great. So, contrarian doesn't necessarily mean it's a windfall. So, what's your favorite activity? You talked a lot about the donuts for dads on Friday, Taco Tuesday. So, what's your favorite activity to do with your family?
yeah, for me, it's definitely Taco Tuesday is really good, man. It's simple, but everyone gets excited about it. It's simple, it's dinner,
Rolls off the
but
tongue.
yeah, it's just lighthearted and fun, and we know what we're getting. So it's my favorite thing, but I would say my family's favorite thing. My wife is Indian, and they love to sing and dance, and they break out the drums and the microphone. I mean, they're serious microphones and everything, right? So I do pujas and all sorts of other like festive and spiritual events. So they really love getting together and singing as a family, and it goes on for like 3 or 4 hours. So they
That's
really
awesome.
love to do that. Yeah.
That's awesome. All right. And the last one, the wrap up. So, I know we talked about fulfillment. So, what actions in general do offer you the most fulfillment in life?
Trying to find ways to help others. I think that's the biggest thing, whether it be, consulting from a real estate standpoint, helping newer investors, given that perspective that we kind of talked about, as well as, I sit on the board for an organization called Search for Water. And Search is a great organization that helps invest in underfunded neighborhoods and communities across the globe. So it's really about providing clean, safe drinking water and sanitation solutions and investing in these communities so they can be self-sufficient going forward. So that's something I'm really passionate about, just because we take these things for granted, right? We have a lot of luxuries as a first world country that we take for granted. And by God, if our internet is a little bit slow, we're frustrated, right? But
Yeah.
in some of these countries, they literally have to go get a pail and go, 5 miles down to a water well, get the water. It may be contaminated, and then walk all the way back. And kids miss school. They miss going to school because they have to go fetch water for their family. So it's something that just it's kind of crazy to me that this is still happening in many parts of the world. But this organization invests in it. One of my wife's friends actually founded the organization. And I remember her telling me she was leaving her consulting job, her well-paying consulting job,
Yep.
to go do this for free. And it just went back to the priority conversation, right? What's our real purpose on this planet? What do we want to do? What do we want to be known for? A job is a job, but to make a real impact on other people in their lives, that's really what legacy is about. So anytime we have a chance to make an impact with an organization like that, or even work with other people, I think that's the best way to give back.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, I'd love to have you share the contact information for that group in the show notes as well, so that we can get that out there to the listeners. So, well, I've really enjoyed this conversation, John. I think our listeners are going to get a lot out of it, about your journey of where you've gotten to where you are now, and really the mindset that you've had to adopt throughout the process. And I think the big thing that resonated with me was just your hunger. I don't want to get between you and what the goal that you have in front of you, because I think that's just tremendous. So, lastly, how can the listeners get a hold of you out there in either socials or your website? What's the best way for folks to get in touch?
Yeah, I'm on most social media platforms. John Casmon is the name on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. I will tell you, on Facebook, there's another John Casmon who's a little bit older.
Not as
That
good
is my
looking.
father.
Yeah.
He will not be able to help you with anything in regards to real estate. So I will let you know that right now. Make sure you see my face. But the best way is, we honestly have a sample deal package on our website. The best thing is, if you download that sample deal, you get a sense of the way we structure our deals, what they look like. And then if you are interested in being a passive investor, obviously you'll get a sense of, what you could expect. And then if you're interested in being active as well, it's a great way to see, get some ideas of how to maybe structure a deal that you may be working on. You'll get on our email list. We'll send you updates of what we're working on, some other marketing tips as well, to help you be a better marketer and track capital for your deals, or attract more deals for your business. So go to casmoncapital.com/sample deal to access that sample deal package.
Sounds good. Well, I know a bunch of folks are going to be visiting that, checking it out. So, well, thanks again, John. I really appreciate the conversation, and keep doing the good work out there with marketing and obviously helping with the world as well. Thanks so much.
Thanks, John. Take care.
Thank you for listening to Contrarian Cashflow. I would greatly appreciate it if you left an honest review, hit subscribe so you never miss an episode, and share with someone you feel would find value. Until next time, think different, earn different, live fulfilled.